Spoiler warning! Hey guys, this is the disembodied voice of Sam from D-Life HD, here to talk to you today about Resident Evil Village. Yes, that's right. It's finally time for our in-depth, spoiler-filled review of the newest entry in the mainline Resident Evil series. We're going to be covering just about every aspect of the game, so stay tuned.
What's up guys, Daniel here. Before Sam gets into the full review, let's talk about how this plays on Stadia. I had the opportunity to actually play both of the demos that were recently released, and because of my internet connection, the game runs really well. The environment looks crisp and the movement is flawless, just like on all the other consoles. The only setback I had was that I own an Xbox Series X controller and the left and right joystick button clicks don't quite work for some strange reason. I guess they haven't added compatibility for both current gen controllers on the Mac. Fortunately, Stadia is also compatible with the keyboard, so I just used the letter C on my keyboard to crouch. Other than that, the gameplay runs great. With that said, take it away, Sam.
First off, let's talk about the game modes included with Village. One of the complaints about the last Resident Evil release, that being Resident Evil 3's 2020 reimagining, was that it lacked content. Now, I myself completed the campaign in one sitting. So yeah, it was a little light on content. Well, let it be known that Resident Evil Village does not suffer from the same problem. The campaign clocks in at around 8 to 14 hours depending on your playstyle. And after beating the campaign, a store is unlocked on the main menu that allows you to purchase new weapons for future playthroughs. The currency used for purchasing weapons can be earned by going for various achievements and repeat playthroughs that serve as a method of spicing up gameplay. And in addition to lots of incentive for replaying the campaign, beating the story once unlocks the side mode, the Mercenaries, which is a returning mode that was first introduced in Resident Evil 3, Nemesis. The Mercenaries sees you taking on remixed stages with waves of enemies and limited resources. It's an arcade experience that has addicted many a player over the years, and this time it operates within the framework of Resident Evil Village's first-person perspective and associated mechanics. There are dozens of hours of fun to be had with the Mercenaries, and your mileage with the mode just depends on what you're willing to put into it. And that's all for the main game, but it should be noted that Resident Evil Village also includes access to a separate online multiplayer game, Reverse, which is a 4 to 6 player third-person shooter, in which you'll play as heroes from the Resident Evil history, competing in 5-minute death matches. And in these matches, you'll have opportunity to transform into deadly baddies from throughout the series' history by collecting virus samples, which will give you a boost in power to help you take out your enemies. It's a fun addition to the package, but we won't be going into many details on that mode since it isn't part of the main game. However, if you're interested in us doing a separate video, whether that be a review or a gameplay video for Reverse, let us know in the comments below because we'd be happy to go more in depth on the mode for you. Now, moving on, let's talk about the presentation. Resident Evil Village was built from the ground up with next gen in mind. It runs on the RE engine, which has brought us beautiful games in the past, such as Resident Evil 7 and Monster Hunter Rise. But the world on display in Village is a step even above those stunning titles. The world of Resident Evil Village will have you stopping to catch your breath as you take in its snow-capped mountains, its castles lit by chandeliers, and even its dank sewers. The polish on display does a fantastic job of drawing you in and immersing you in its ironically beautiful, horrific world. Even on last-gen hardware, whether that be the Xbox One or the PS4, the vision the creators had for the game is not sabotaged and comes through looking surprisingly clean. Standout areas for me personally were the namesake village with its rundown shacks and snowy vistas, the castle full of ornate garnishes everywhere and stunning lighting, and the factory, which was an incredible industrial area featuring strewn about bits and bobs of machinery and dimly lit hallways. Village feels like a proper step towards next gen. And if you're like me, your first playthrough will be artificially lengthened by the amount of time you'll spend in the photo mode, trying to capture your favorite areas to share with friends. The focus on graphical prowess definitely paid off for Village, especially considering the first-person perspective the game adopts, which forces players to be constantly soaking in their surroundings. Now, switching over to discuss gameplay, which is sure to be a meaty and heavily subjective section, You play as Ethan Winters, the protagonist from Resident Evil 7 Biohazard. First person has once again been adopted as the perspective of choice, and the controls here have been carried over from Biohazard. As they say, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. However, in addition to running and gunning, Ethan has been given one new move that's sure to help him out in sticky situations. After blocking an enemy attack, another click of the block button will allow him to shove enemies away, giving you a moment to reload or get in a few shots. It's a very helpful addition, especially considering that Village throws a large number of enemies at you to contend with at once, more than Biohazard ever did. You won't be too overwhelmed though, as several tweaks to the formula put Ethan in a good position to fight back this time around. For one, crafting is back, but it's been fleshed out considerably. Resources will be found scattered about, acting as a good incentive for exploration, and they can be used to craft various types of ammo, explosives, and healing items. Obviously, better items require more materials, so you'll have to think ahead before crafting, especially on higher difficulties. Now, to make room for all your crafted items, Ethan's inventory space has been greatly increased, allowing him to carry several weapons, ammo types, and healing salves into battle. Key items and treasures no longer take up precious inventory slots, so the biggest limitation to how many items you can take with you is your own ability to cleverly rotate and fit them into the space given to you. The inventory is one of the many elements of Village to take inspiration from Resident Evil 4. Another returning element from 4 is the Merchant. The Merchant, who goes by the Duke this time around, will frequently be found throughout your playthrough and offers many services to Ethan. You can purchase weapons, weapon modifications, ammunition, crafting recipes, and more from him, as well as have him upgrade your weapons for higher damage, ammo capacity, reload speed, and rate of fire. And a little ways into the game, you'll be able to bring him cooking ingredients, which can be made into meals that act as permanent buffs for Ethan, such as more health. All of the Duke's services come at a high price though, so you'll need cash. Now luckily, the Duke will buy just about anything off of you, most notably treasure. Treasure can be found tucked away in every corner of the world, as well as looted from downed foes, so the main gameplay loop becomes kill enemies, collect treasure, sell treasure, upgrade your weapons, and repeat. Now there are a lot of puzzles to be found in Village, but they play second fiddle to the action for the most part. They're definitely better than the puzzles found in Resident Evil 3, but they don't quite reach the heights of Biohazard. That doesn't keep Village's combat-focused gameplay loop from being a lot of fun though, and watching Ethan go from absolutely helpless to a one-man army is a satisfying time. But as Ethan grows stronger, the enemies grow tougher, so it never feels completely unbalanced. Now, one common pitfall that most horror games fall into is losing their tension as the player acquires more options for combating their enemies and begins to gain familiarity with their surroundings. Village combats this problem by constantly switching things up on the player. There's an impressive amount of variety in the gameplay, enemy types, and environments. I'm sure that the variety of enemies and bosses especially will be appreciated by those who are critical of Biohazard's meager number of enemy types. The game even does a great job of setting up many of its bosses early on, filling you with a sense of dread knowing you'll have to take them all on at some point. There were a surprising number of boss encounters, spread across an equally surprising number of locations, and they all felt worthwhile to me, which I can't say for many of the boss fights from previous Resident Evil titles. As far as the locations go, there's a generous number of places to journey to, several of which are completely hidden away and optional. One area that you'll be visiting several times is the main village, but it's enriched by evolving with each visit, as new areas open up to explore, and new enemies populate it. In fact, there's incentive to backtrack to quite a few areas, as the village is not the only location to evolve throughout a playthrough. Now sadly, not all areas are revisitable, but the environment remains open to exploration for the most part. The game taps into many veins of horror throughout its runtime, and manages to shake things up frequently without disrupting the gameplay loop too severely. Really, my only criticism of the ambitious amount of content here is that some of the areas feel a little less developed than the others, which can lead to a strange feeling of whiplash when going from the longer areas of the game to the much shorter areas, or vice versa. However, I'll gladly take this over the linear repetition of Resident Evil 3's reimagining, or the bloated campaigns of Resident Evil 6. It feels like Capcom really hit the nail on the head here, and I personally really enjoyed it. Alright, let's switch gears again and talk briefly about the music and sound design in Village.
Her mother to pick berries for her father, who was hard at work. But the forest greeted them with a dark, cold silence.
Mia, get down! Mia! What are you talking about? Where's Chris Redfield? And Rose?
Who is this? This is a secure channel.
While working on this review, I listened to the soundtrack to Village, and I was able to recall several of the tunes from when I played the game. However, most of the tracks did not stand out during gameplay, and I was especially disappointed by the save room theme. If you don't know, one thing Resident Evil is known for is having beautiful, chilling save room themes that serve as a eye of the storm between hectic bits of gameplay. This was personally disappointing to me as I found Biohazard's save theme to be incredibly memorable, and I was hoping to catch my breath with Ethan to a chilling tune a second time. I'm constantly changing my mind about what my favorite Resident Evil save room song is, so I'm just a little disappointed that Village's song won't be a new contender. Alright, go ahead. Go to the comments and harass me for nitpicking, but hey, I had to be honest on this one. But for real, the music in Village just takes such a backseat, it's hard to praise, but there are a few notable tracks, and we'll give it a pass because the sound design is outstanding. And trust me, I expected no less after the amazing work that's been done with the past few Resident Evil titles. I played the entire game with studio headphones on, full volume, just so I could really experience everything it had to offer, and I do not regret it. The sound design will keep you on edge and really boost the spook factor, as well as immerse you in the world. Part of the reason I was able to enjoy the game as much as I did, playing it on last-gen hardware, was because the sound design kept me immersed even when the graphics had their occasional hiccups. Capcom has developed a very convincing way of presenting sound that places each sound around you in real time to mimic the position it would be in relative to your character in game. It's like 3D glasses for your ears, and it's awesome. I really can't praise the sound design enough, as it's easily the unsung hero of the game, and it does a lot to draw you in as a player. Alright, lastly, we'll discuss the story, and this is where the majority of the spoilers would be. If you haven't played the game yet, and you don't want to be spoiled, we'll put a pinned comment down below with a timestamp so you can skip to the next section of the video. This is your final warning. Alright, are they gone? Good. Dude, that story was crazy. If you have played it already, then you know. The story picks up a few years after the tragedy of Resident Evil 7. Ethan and his wife Mia have been moved to Europe by Chris Redfield to start a new life, away from the memories of what happened to them in Louisiana. They've made progress reclaiming their lives, even having their first child together, a baby named Rose. However, Ethan is still haunted by his memories and gets the feeling that Mia isn't willing to talk about what happened because she's hiding something from him. One night, before anything gets resolved between the two of them, Chris and a team of armed personnel break into the Winter's home and kill Mia, followed by abducting Ethan and Rose. When Ethan next opens his eyes, he finds himself next to an overturned truck with no sign of Chris or Rose to be found. As the sun begins to rise, Ethan finds himself in a snow-covered village that looks like it's been ransacked. As he searches for signs of life, he runs into an old man who's hiding in his pantry. The man tells him to be quiet and gives him a gun. It's not long before Lycans, aka werewolves in layman's terms, attack the village, killing the lone villager and taking a chunk out of Ethan's hand. That poor guy's hands. Ethan survives the attack and comes across an elderly woman who tells him that his daughter is alive and is in the castle looming on the horizon. Ethan presses forward, coming across more villagers, only to watch them turn into Lycans and turn on each other. Determined to get his daughter, Ethan makes his way out of the village and into the castle, where he's intercepted by a mysterious man. Ethan gets knocked out again and awakens in front of 5 odd beings, some human, some not so much. Ethan escapes and meets the Duke. Long story short, the Duke informs Ethan that the mysterious beings he met earlier were the 4 lords of the village and their mother, Miranda. The Duke tells Ethan that the 4 lords each have a piece of his daughter, and that she can be revived if he can collect all the pieces. Let me interject here and just say that baby parts? Definitely the most unique MacGuffin I've ever seen collectible in a video game. Left me wide-eyed during my playthrough for sure. Throughout the game, you'll guide Ethan as he takes down the 4 lords and reclaims his daughter. Along the way, you'll discover notes that explain Mother Miranda's sick experiments that led to the creation of the creatures invading the village. As it turns out, the village contains the original source of the mold that was so prevalent in Resident Evil 7, and all of the creatures attacking the village came as the result of Mother Miranda experimenting on villagers with the mold. Upon finding the final part of Rose, Ethan reunites with Chris, who reveals to him that Miranda has the ability to take any form, which she used to pose as Mia in order to steal Rose. Chris explains that Mia is likely being held captive somewhere and that Miranda is still alive, despite him shooting her in the opening of the game. Ethan decides to go after Miranda, but is confronted by her sooner than expected, where she reveals to him that she plans to use Rose as a host to revive her own daughter who had died. Before Ethan can take her on, she rips out his heart and he dies. After this, you take control of Chris, who is on the hunt for the source of the mold so he can destroy it. In his search, he comes across Miranda's workshop, where you uncover several documents explaining the creation of the Four Lords. Digging around, you can even discover connections to the team that created EV from Resident Evil 7, and to the founder of Umbrella Corporation. It runs the risk of feeling a bit forced, but it honestly feels like a great way of tying the series together as a whole. After looking around for a bit, Chris comes across Mia, who was indeed being held captive by Miranda. Chris sets her free and then moves on to the source of the mold and plants explosives in it. At this point, the story switches back to Ethan's perspective, who seems to be hallucinating a conversation with Eveline from Biohazard. She reveals to him that he is dead, but tells him that he has been dead since the beginning of Resident Evil 7 when Jack knocked him out cold in the attic of the baker's home. At that point, his body was taken over by the mold, which gave him, and by extension Rose, their regenerative abilities. Ethan's resistance to the mold corruption kept him from realizing all this time that he was a dead man walking. After this revelation, Ethan wakes in the back of the Duke's carriage. The Duke brought him to where Miranda waits with Rose, and Ethan without hesitation rushes to take her on. Despite everything that he endured, Ethan is still determined to save his daughter. Ethan kills Miranda after a long and very intense battle, and rescues Rose. However, determined to stop the spread of the mold, Ethan gives Rose to Chris and insists on staying behind to detonate the explosives planted by Chris. In classic Resident Evil fashion, the story ends with Chris, Mia, and Rose leaving in a helicopter, with Ethan staying behind. Flash forward to the future, and we briefly get to meet a grown-up Rose who places flowers on Ethan's grave, and leaves with a mysterious suit-wearing figure in an unmarked vehicle. The end is left ambiguous, likely meant to serve as a setup for a future Resident Evil title. And that's it. Obviously that was just the cliff notes, but the story is surprisingly robust this time around, without going the full cinematic route. The story is sure to be controversial, and whether you enjoy it or not is completely subjective. I'm sure many will disapprove of the series moving in a less grounded direction than the days of zombies and viruses, but, I mean, come on. That wasn't very grounded in the first place. Still, I personally don't mind, and I thought the story was really gripping and served as a nice conclusion to the threads left untied by Biohazard. The setup at the end left me excited for what was to come as well. And I really enjoyed the characters. I thought they were unique and well acted, especially the Four Lords and the Duke. Oh, the Duke, what a great character. One complaint I saw brought up quite a bit about Village and Resident Evil 7 was Ethan's character. Many called him a bit of a blank slate, but I actually thought he was improved quite a bit in this game from his appearance in Biohazard. One part of Village that I haven't heard anyone bring up is Ethan's journal that fills out throughout the game. In it, he writes his thoughts on what's going on around him, and I thought it did a lot to flesh out his character, while not having him say too much during the actual gameplay. I think it was a great addition, and all in all, I think the story was engaging and drew me in. I wouldn't change a thing, honestly. Now, to wrap up this review, I'll just say that I really enjoyed the game, and I hope you get a chance to play it if you haven't already. Don't be afraid to spring for it on last gen either. It runs really well enough for what it is, and you'll have a blast. If you felt burned by the lack of content in last year's Resident Evil 3, do not fear. Village is packed with content, and you can definitely wait for a sale if you're not sure. The all-around package is fantastic, with really the only music sticking out as a weak point. I won't give the game a number score, but I will give it my own personal seal of approval, and a big recommendation from all of us here on the channel. Well, that's going to be all for today. Thanks for sticking around until the end. If you enjoyed the review, make sure to like and subscribe for more. And of course, make sure to tell us what you thought of Resident Evil Village down in the comments below. And check the description for a link to our community Discord server if you want to keep the conversation going and talk all things video games. Until next time, I've been Sam here at DLife HD. Peace.